Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, of course.
So I just want to go straight into it and start talking about Draper and Dash.
Yeah.
If you can give me a little bit of rundown of what your company does,
Yeah.
and I think everyone will be really interested and keen.
Yeah, perfect. So Draper and Dash is a data-driven transformation service. The company spun out of healthcare with the goal of helping organizations to better utilize their data and to support trusts who have this sort of digital innovation roadmap and goals in mind, and then just maybe need a little support getting there, because I think there's a lot of work to be done in data science is a very new field, and I think there's a lot of work to be done to build that in and to get the understanding of it. So we want to be that bridge in helping organizations who are doing a lot of really good work and have that sort of mindset of looking into the future of how data can be used better, and then just supporting them to sort of get there and to achieve their goals, really.
Yeah, because it must be quite difficult because it's so new. There's a lot of new challenges and hurdles that you have to go through, and I think innovation is probably at the forefront of that. How tricky is it to get people to understand exactly what you're doing and some of the benefits you can provide?
Yeah, there's a couple of different factors, and it's a really good point because it's something we obviously run into. So I think there's a technology side as well as a data side that we're running into. So especially within healthcare, which is where we're predominantly focused, I think in the past there have been technological solutions that have come in, and this will fix all of the NHS's problems. Here's some technology, it'll make everything work better. And it just hasn't happened, right? Everything's sort of fallen back to old ways, and there's this bit of a negative culture around technology. So we've got that factor, but also with data, there's so much varying understanding of it. We've got everyone thinking about privacy data and what's Facebook doing with our data and so forth. So they've got that mindset to look at. But then also, if you step beyond that, I think it's just such a broad field that it sometimes can be difficult to understand what's possible with it and how much data actually is there, and then how can you connect it and how can you use it. So a big part of what we've been doing is trying to also educate. I think has been a big part of our role, rather than necessarily sell or try to convince people, as will help. So for example, we run a patient flow summit every year in London where we bring together senior leadership in the NHS and so forth, bringing good examples from other organizations who have done things well, and just try to educate and work around strategy workshops. And the focus is to educate people on just what the potential is. So I think that's the biggest trick, is understanding what can be done and how it can be used.
That'll be quite interesting, because that is a big challenge, and is the educational element of it. But I think at the same time, because you're working with technology, a lot of people, I think there's so many big buzzwords going around and flying, right? Even smart cities is a huge one. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
So what are the key benefits and key, I don't know, the key things you kind of want to showcase to different people? This is what we're providing. This is what Draper Dash does, and this is the end result. Or is there anything that you kind of want to, what the core message is, essentially?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing with data science is so many organizations are at varying levels, and I think what we really want to push with people is we can help you throughout that full roadmap, or throughout your full digital journey. So some organizations are right at the start, and they understand they want to do something with their data, but their quality might be really bad. You've got years of legacy of manual data entry, and people are still going back and having to translate old paper files, and those will be full of errors and so forth. So we can help organizations just fix their data, basically, and get it into a point where there's confidence in it. We speak to a lot of organizations, and data confidence is a big issue, where once you're starting to report down with the data, people can very quickly use that as no, I don't trust the data, like this, it's not right for this and this reason. So we can build frameworks around that which help you be confident, like, no, this is an accurate reflection of the performance and an indication of where things might be going right and wrong. We then get to organizations who are a lot more digitally mature, and we're starting to bring in that innovation of using sort of machine learning, which is obviously one of the big buzzwords, and AI. We say that hesitantly, but using that sort of predictive element as well. So there's a lot we can do to really help organizations along that and try get them progressing along the roadmap, I guess.
That makes quite a lot of sense. So essentially what you're doing is, no matter where someone is at on their journey, you basically, if they have any data, you'll scrub it, you understand it, and you'll help them make better decisions from that data.
And just try to dig in and find the insights. So once you have the data, it's about, and I think that's where data science comes in as well. So it's not just the analytics, there's a science to getting into the insight. And one, you can look at some very obvious metrics, and everybody's used to obviously identifying KPIs and this is our performance numbers and so forth. But what I think we start to help people do is, okay, once we then bring in this information and this information, how do we correlate that to then find the insights behind it as well? So yeah, we can look at these KPIs, but how does this one impact this one? And how do we then track how they're connected, and then if we want to make improvement to it, because that's a big piece as well, is then how do we track that improvement?
I do have a question though, actually, because this is really, really interesting. Because personally, I'm working in tech and hearing about all these different companies and learning more about big data. It kind of highlights some of the inefficiency of big data, because all the data that you're kind of researching, you might not need it.
Yeah.
You don't need the data that you're collecting. Only certain parts of it is actually beneficial, and you can actually make an executive decision from it.
Yeah.
So will Draper and Dash also be looking to actually see the collection process and see, actually, this is probably not worth collecting, you're wasting money on this, this is a better type of data to collect?
Yeah, it's actually been a big part of our process as we've been tackling building predictive analytics. So we've worked with over 70 organizations within the NHS and other ones in different parts of that roadmap. So, it's not all machine learning and so forth, as we said, different elements. But what we found is every organization is different. Everyone's at a different point in their roadmap, and they've all got varying amounts of data. And what we found really useful, or how we've had to approach it, is to almost take a minimalist approach to how we can support an organization. So like you said, don't worry about this data set, don't worry about this information. These are the keys we need, because it becomes more universal then, of going, all right, if we can get your inpatients data, we can get your outpatients data, and we can get your ED data, then we can provide this for you. And we can keep expanding, and it'll be great to get in radiology and great to get in your theaters and so forth and start to build that out. But we can minimize it down to this and get you the most impact out of focusing on these sectors and so forth. And then we want to start looking at bringing in other stuff. So
we've got that foundation.
We've kind of almost out of necessity had to take that approach of going, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. You're trying to think about too many things. Let's focus on this and build out, because machine learning is really about identifying a key problem and trying to answer that. It's not going to fix all of it.
Yeah.
Find a problem, a specific problem you want to fix, and then build a solution around it. Yeah.
That's excellent. So actually, can you tell me a bit more about your case studies or any projects that you're working on that people might be interested in terms of, what about local governments? Are you working?
Yeah. So we're obviously predominantly in healthcare sector, and a big part of health at the moment and where things are heading, and another big buzzword is obviously integrated care. So it's all about becoming, how do we work together to better utilize our data and to improve patient flow and population health and so forth. And so we've got a couple of projects that are starting to get into that sort of area. So we've done some work previously with a local council in London, and that was specifically for them around helping track and analyze their postcode data and so forth to target their sports program, which worked on their sort of diabetes program and so forth to improve the borough's health and whatnot. Obviously ends up having an impact on the healthcare system, which is good. If you get healthier people at home, more active, they're not ending up in the hospital, etc. So everything still ends up in some way connected. But what we're starting to do, we're working with a council in the Midlands who have a really close working relationship with their acute and some of their community, and working out how we can connect those processes. So one of the things we do within an acute space is predict the likelihood of a patient being in hospital too long. So stranded or super stranded patients. We can identify the dominant factors for that. That's one part, and then we have another part where we can predict the likelihood of a patient coming back into hospital after their discharge. So within 28 days, what's the likelihood that you come back into hospital once we send you home? And we can predict a couple of other things as well that helps, but essentially what we're able to start doing is take that data, connect it with the council and the community, and then start to develop sort of post-care pathways where we go, okay, you're likely to come back into hospital. Why? Can we then create a program that helps you not come back in? So can we help you at home? Can we provide some healthcare at home that will answer those dominant factors and keep you out of the system, basically? And the same thing with the length of stay, and why I mentioned that. If we know you're going to be in hospital for 20 plus days, which nobody should be, it's bad for your health, can we find pathways? Can we identify patients who we can maybe send home and the community can step in and support, and they'll come back in and so forth. But the more we can keep someone at home and healthy, the better for that patient, the better for the system as well. So it's a very new field, which is good. Everybody's starting to look at this space, but what we're doing is trying to support and be the bridge between multiple people's data sets and identifying how that it is. And supporting them to make that change, I think, is really key as well.
No, it's really amazing because it's kind of like a fundamental of smart cities. Because I mean, in our definition, smart cities are all about people.
Yeah.
And they have to be the main focus at the end of the day, especially when you're building a huge city. And so I think one of the key things is that community element of it, seeing how you can help out, how you can save costs, as well as help people's lives, because no one wants to be stuck in a hospital.
No.
But I know this is quite new and a little bit fresh, but it kind of shows the importance, I mean, especially with the likes of like any viruses that are happening, like coronavirus is probably a very big one happening right now. What do you think some of the benefits of your technology, and how do you think that can help in the future, any outbreaks or anything?
Yeah, so I think it's about trying to predict some of this stuff, and I think then what you'll be able to start to do is lessen some of the impact as well. So if you're starting to notice trends, a lot of our stuff works on, we've got short-term models as well as long-term models from the predictive element. So we can pick up spikes in ED attendance and so forth as well. So you can start to apply some of the demand and capacity models to that then as well, which means you can better quickly adapt and answer to these sort of things. What we've also found, we've been working with like some ambulance services in like risk stratifying their call center, right? So at the moment, they'll be getting a lot more calls, which have to be categorized into levels of priority and risk and so forth. So what we can do with the predictive stuff is start to actually prioritize those patients. So if a lot of people are calling in with flu-like symptoms at the moment around coronavirus and so forth, we don't want that to take away from the patients who are at a high risk and need care as urgent, more urgently. So with predictive analytics and doing that very proactive approach, we can start to give sort of risk stratification, so we can identify the highest priority people in that call stack, so the ambulance service can respond better and quicker as well. So then you're still impacting patient care that way as well. So I think there's a lot in the sort of support and the response, I guess, and being as real time as possible.
And that's excellent. And in terms of your the way your system and everything works, can you link up different like areas together and then monitor real-time data that way? Yeah,
so I mean the sky's the limit a little bit, to be honest, with the data, and it's one of and you mentioned earlier some of the issues we face, and then one of them then becomes privacy, GDPR, data sharing agreements and so forth. So I think that's where we can definitely be that bridge and connect it up. We have a sort of a data operating system layer that we've built in-house that sort of supports feeding all that data in from numerous systems, processing it a little bit, adding a predictive element, and then we can put the output out in multiple ways, because again, each organization has a different business intelligence tool they're using or a different way of reporting and so forth. So we're very system agnostic. We can take data feeds in from many places. We can put them out to many places. So we're really that sort of bridge in connecting everything together and then getting it across to an output.
Awesome. And I think we've talked about national, but have you, I believe you've done projects internationally as well?
We've supported organizations internationally as well. So we do some work in Australia. We're just doing a bit more work in the States at the moment as well. They've got a big focus on diabetes because it's a really high cost, high resource area for them. So if we can help them to use their data to better identify patients that are the highest cost at the highest risk level and so forth, and you start to develop more focused pathways around them. Might only be a small percentage of the population, but if you can identify them and understand the dominant factors in why they're your high-risk patients, and you can impact those 2 to 5%, it'll have a big impact on your resources and finances, because we know in healthcare it's quite often that those high comorbidities and those high patients that are using a lot of the system. So there's a lot of focus around trying to support with the population and the data as well as the hospital data and so forth around those sort of patients.
Do you think that information, that data can be used cross-border as well? So then the information and research you do in Australia or America can also apply to the UK, depending on the city?
Yeah, so I think what becomes applicable is the underlying principle of the insight. So what's valuable to understand, right? And I think that's going to continue to grow as well. So obviously in healthcare at the moment, RFID tracking is coming into a lot of places, wearable devices. We've all got information in our watches now. Some hospitals in the UK are already introducing like Alexas and Google Home. So you've got voice data and so forth as well. How many people are starting to identify when they're having calling a nurse because they're having pain and so forth over voice and whatnot. So as more of that data comes in, I think it's about learning from that and understanding how to properly use it, as you sort of mentioned earlier, right? Identifying what data is useful and what's not and applying those principles. So while a lot of stuff has to be slightly tailored, I think what we've learned as a company and why we sort of spun out of the NHS and healthcare to build one is you can build a wireframe from your insights and then tailor it and just bake in the last little bit for an individual government. So something we learned in London could very well be applied in Singapore with the basic understandings of this is how we're using wearable data here, or this is how the insights we've pulled out. We'll tailor it and localize it to your demographic and so forth, but the key frame, the infrastructure is there for how to pull in that data and so forth. So I think it's just about applying those principles and then localizing it and tailoring it to the individual government after that.
Awesome. And I think we're going to be running out of time soon, but if there's anything else that you want to update us on what Draper Dash is doing or where you're heading or what your goals are?
Yeah, I think it's definitely just worth sort of checking us out on some of the socials and so forth. We put out a podcast almost weekly with some really interesting guests from within the NHS. I think it's quite an underserved area, and there's a quite wide range of conversations. So we're on Spotify and iTunes and everything with the future of healthcare. So some really good sort of thought-provoking conversations there. Orlando, our founder, is very happy to have controversial conversations as well, which is nice. And I think a little bit needed in the healthcare. We're getting to a point where a bit of disruption is going to be helpful. So I think we just want to sort of promote that level of education, understanding, and then hopefully once people understand a little bit more about what they might be able to do with their data, and if they want to come to us for some further help, that's where we can come in. But yeah, if there's anyone in the local area, we've got the event in June as well for the Patient Flow Summit. Yeah. Awesome. So come along. There'll be a lot of really good strategy workshops, a lot of high-level people from the healthcare system to sort of look at how we can all work together around a number of different topics to use data better for patient health.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a
Thanks
pleasure.
so much. Cheers. It's been great. Cheers.